Marcus Brutus reaches Caesar's door before dawn on March 15, 44 BCE, not to kill him, but to save him. Hands shaking, voice cracking, Brutus names every conspirator, describes every hidden blade, and maps the exact positions waiting inside the theater of Pompeii. Caesar, the dictator perpetuo who had pardoned these very men after civil war, stands in silence as the man he treated like a son dismantles the plot that was minutes from ending his life. The conspiracy was not small. Roughly 60 senators had joined, led by Gaius Cassius Longinus and Brutus himself, both former enemies of Caesar whom he had forgiven after defeating Pompey's forces. For weeks, the haruspex spurina had warned Caesar to beware the Ides of March. Caesar had dismissed his Spanish bodyguard, refused a permanent security detail, and waved off every omen. He believed visible protection was beneath the dignity of Rome's leader. In this alternate timeline exploration, we examine what could have happened and why the real history unfolded differently. But what Caesar does in the next hour will reshape not just his own fate, but the entire trajectory of Western civilization. And the man who saved him will pay a price no pardon can cover. Caesar sends immediately for Mark Antony, his co-consul and most trusted general. Within the hour, veterans loyal to Caesar, men who had fought beside him in Gaul, in Egypt, in Spain, surround the theater of Pompeii. The Senate session is minutes from beginning. The conspirators are already inside, daggers concealed beneath their togas, waiting for the signal that will never come. Caesar's veterans storm the theater with the efficiency of men who have taken fortified towns across 3 continents. The senators inside, many of them uninvolved in the plot, scatter in panic as armed soldiers pour through every entrance. Cassius is seized mid-reach, his weapon confiscated before he can draw it. Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus, the trusted general who had been assigned to ensure Caesar reached the theater that morning, is dragged from the building in chains. The betrayal of Decimus cuts deeper than Cassius. This was a man from Caesar's inner circle, a commander who had served him in Gaul. A handful of conspirators escape in the chaos. Some flee to their estates outside the city. Others make for the ports, hoping to reach sympathetic provinces before Caesar's messengers do. But most are caught within the hour, trapped by a city that belongs to Caesar in every meaningful sense. By midday, Caesar stands on the rostra in the Forum, addressing the Roman people. He does not frame this as a personal attack. He frames it as treason against the people's chosen leader, against the man who gave them land reform, the Julian calendar, public works, and veteran settlements. The crowd, already loyal, turns furious. The conspirators are not martyrs for republican liberty. They are would-be murderers of Rome's benefactor. Caesar understands something his enemies never grasped. In the politics of popular legitimacy, the people are the only jury that matters. The trials begin within days, and Caesar orchestrates them with the precision of a man who has spent decades mastering both the sword and the courtroom. These are public proceedings, held in full view of the Roman populace, but they are also political theater of the highest order. Caesar wants Rome to watch. Cassius, the principal architect of the conspiracy, is tried first. The evidence is overwhelming. Brutus's testimony alone is damning, corroborated by documents seized from conspirators' homes. Cassius offers no defense beyond the claim that he acted for the Republic. Caesar allows him to speak at length. It serves the purpose. Let Rome hear the oligarch's argument and reject it. Cassius is condemned and executed. Decimus follows. His betrayal from within Caesar's own circle makes his case particularly useful as a cautionary tale. The remaining conspirators face a spectrum of punishments calibrated for political effect. Some are executed. Others are exiled, their properties confiscated and redistributed to veterans and the urban poor. A few minor participants are stripped of rank and released. Visible reminders that Caesar's mercy is real, but conditional. And then there is Brutus, the man who warned Caesar, the man without whom the dictator would be dead. Caesar pardons him publicly, with ceremony and apparent warmth. Privately, the calculation is colder. Brutus is given a minor governorship, Cisalpine Gaul perhaps, or some provincial backwater, far enough from Rome that his influence evaporates. close enough that he remains under watch. Brutus has betrayed every side. The Republicans will never trust him again. Caesar will never fully trust him either. He is rewarded with irrelevance, and both men know it. The Purge leaves the Senate with dozens of empty seats, and Caesar fills them with a deliberateness that horrifies Rome's old aristocratic families. Veterans from his legions, men who understand loyalty through shared mud and blood rather than inherited name, take their places on the benches. Provincial elites from Gaul, from Spain, from the Eastern Territories, men who owe everything to Caesar's patronage, join them. For the first time, the Senate of Rome reflects not the narrow genealogy of the Palatine Hill, but the sprawling diversity of an empire. Traditional aristocrats are appalled. To them, the Senate is a sacred institution of the Roman oligarchy, a body whose membership has been defined by birth, wealth, and the careful alliances of ancient families for centuries. Caesar is not reforming the Senate. He is replacing it with something that answers only to him. The legislation that follows makes the transformation permanent. Caesar introduces measures granting himself sole authority over military appointments and treasury disbursements, powers that had traditionally required senatorial approval. The new senators, who owe their positions entirely to Caesar, vote unanimously in favor. The mechanics of republican governance still exist. The Senate still meets, still debates, still votes, but the outcomes are predetermined by a loyalty structure that begins and ends with one man. What had been eroding for decades through the precedents set by Marius, Sulla, and the First Triumvirate is now formalized. Rome has a king in everything but name. The consequences of this concentration of power will prove catastrophic in ways no one yet imagines. But first, Caesar turns his attention to a question that will define his dynasty. With domestic opposition shattered, Caesar confronts the problem he has been avoiding. Succession. Cleopatra VII, Queen of Egypt, remains in Rome with their son Caesarion, a living, breathing symbol of everything Roman aristocrats fear. The child is Caesar's biological son, born of an alliance that blends military strategy with genuine attachment, and his very existence raises a question that Roman law has no framework to answer. Caesar's will names Gaius Octavius, his 18-year-old grandnephew, currently studying rhetoric and military science in Apollonia, as his adopted heir. But adoption is a legal mechanism, not a bloodline. Caesarion is flesh and blood. Caesar begins legal maneuvers to recognize both, creating a parallel structure of inheritance that satisfies neither Roman tradition nor Egyptian expectation. The implications fracture Caesar's own coalition. Antony, who sees himself as the natural successor by virtue of military seniority and political partnership, watches with growing unease as Caesar elevates a teenager and a toddler above him. Octavian, recalled from Apollonia, arrives in Rome to find that his position as sole heir is no longer secure. He is sharp enough to smile and patient enough to wait, but the rivalry with Caesarion, a child who cannot yet speak for himself, has already begun. Cleopatra, navigating Roman politics with the skill of a woman who has survived her own family's murderous succession struggles, pushes quietly for Caesarion's recognition. She understands that her son's status in Rome is the only guarantee of Egypt's independence. Caesar, characteristically, refuses to resolve the tension. He keeps all three potential successors, Antony, Octavian, Caesarion, in competition, believing that ambiguity preserves his own centrality. It is a strategy that works brilliantly while he lives. It is also a time bomb. In the spring of 44 BCE, Caesar had been planning a massive military campaign against Parthia, the empire that had humiliated Rome when Marcus Licinius Crassus led 7 legions to annihilation at Carrhae in 53 BCE. In real history, the assassination cancelled those plans permanently. In this timeline, nothing stands in the way. Caesar marches east with a unified force that no civil war has diminished. His army is the most experienced in the Mediterranean world, veterans of Gaul, Pharsalus, Thapsus, and Munda, now reinforced with fresh levies and allied contingents. The campaign follows the route Caesar had studied for months, through Asia Minor, into Armenia, and down into Mesopotamia, along the Euphrates corridor that Crassus had fatally mishandled. The early victories are significant. Caesar's tactical genius, combined with the logistical discipline that characterized his Gallic campaigns, produces results that Crassus never could have achieved. Parthian cavalry, the horse archers whose mobility had destroyed Crassus's infantry squares, find themselves fighting a commander who has spent a career adapting to unfamiliar enemies. Caesar takes fortified positions along the Euphrates, establishes supply lines that cannot be easily cut, and forces pitched engagements where Roman infantry superiority tells, but complete conquest proves elusive. Parthia is not Gaul. The distances are vast, the terrain favors defense in depth, and the Parthian monarchy can absorb territorial losses and retreat further east. Caesar secures a favorable treaty, extends Roman influence deep into Mesopotamia, and returns to Rome claiming triumph. The victory is real but incomplete, a pattern that will matter when his successors must decide whether to hold, expand, or abandon his eastern gains. Caesar returns from the east to a Rome that has grown comfortable with one-man rule. The Senate functions as a ratification body. The courts operate within boundaries he defines. Public opinion, sustained by land distributions, building projects, and military glory, remains firmly in his favor. But Caesar is now in his late 50s, and the health episodes, the recurring seizures that ancient sources attribute to epilepsy, are worsening. He is visibly aging, visibly fragile, and everyone in Rome can see it. The succession question, deferred and managed through creative ambiguity, becomes impossible to avoid. Three candidates circle the throne that does not officially exist. Antony commands the loyalty of the legions and the political machinery of the consulship. Octavian has spent years learning the arts of alliance building, propaganda, and patient maneuvering, skills that will one day make him Augustus, though that name belongs to a different timeline. Caesarion, now a young child, represents a dynastic claim that is foreign to Roman political tradition but carries the undeniable weight of blood. Caesar, weakened by illness, still refuses to choose. He plays the three against each other with the instinct of a man who has survived decades of Roman politics by never allowing any single ally to become indispensable. But the game requires a player with the energy to sustain it, and Caesar's energy is failing. The court around him fragments into factions: Antony's military men, Octavian's political operators, Cleopatra's Egyptian advisors, each preparing for a future their patron will not share. And then comes the moment that defines everything that follows. Not a single dramatic event, but a slow realization spreading through Rome's corridors of power. The dictator Perpetuo is mortal. The system he built has no mechanism for replacing him, and the competition for his legacy will not be settled by law. Caesar's centralized autocracy holds Rome together through his lifetime. The economy functions. The borders are secure. The provinces are administered with reasonable competence. For the average Roman citizen, the urban worker, the military veteran, the provincial merchant, the system works. It works because one man of extraordinary ability stands at its center, absorbing contradictions, managing rivalries, and projecting enough force and charisma to keep the machinery turning. But a system built around a single irreplaceable individual is not a system. It is a suspension of the underlying problem. And the underlying problem is the one that destroyed the Republic in the first place. Rome has no peaceful mechanism for transferring supreme power. The old republican institutions, elections, term limits, senatorial authority, have been hollowed out so thoroughly that they cannot be restored. The new autocratic institutions, the permanent dictatorship, the military loyalty oaths, the centralized treasury have been designed for one man's use, not for orderly succession. When Caesar's health finally fails, the same forces that tore the Republic apart reassemble with terrible familiarity. Ambitious generals command personal armies. Competing factions claim legitimacy through different interpretations of the dead man's will. Provincial governors calculate whether their legions are strong enough to make a bid for Rome. The civil wars that Caesar's survival was supposed to prevent do not disappear. They are deferred. And deferred crises, compounded by years of unresolved tensions, often prove worse than the originals. Marcus Brutus's warning on the Ides of March saved one man's life and gave Rome a generation of stability it would not otherwise have known. But it also proved something that the conspirators, for all their flawed methods, had dimly understood. The problem was never simply who held power. The problem was a political system that had outgrown its own institutions, where the gap between the machinery of a city-state and the reality of a Mediterranean empire could only be bridged by extraordinary individuals, and extraordinary individuals do not last. Caesar lived. Rome still had to become something new. The only question was how much blood the transformation would cost, and whose hands would shape what emerged from the other side.